Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth, the go-to podcast to help you plan for your future. I'm your host, Gary Helt, and today's episode features a very special guest, David T. Yu. David is a seasoned financial wealth advisor with over 20 years of experience in financial services, mortgage banking, real estate investments, and property management. He founded DTY Wealth Planning Solutions to help clients achieve their financial goals. David is also a certified rescue scuba diver, an avid skier, and adventure sports enthusiast. Fluent in Mandarin and experienced in international living, his global perspective and commitment to ethics make him a perfect addition to our show. We're thrilled to have David on board. Please welcome my guest host, David T. Yu.
Welcome to your business, Grow Your Wealth podcast. I'm your guest host, David Yu. Today, we have a special guest, Dr. Dylan Caldwell, an experienced FAA certified aviation medical examiner that serves professional as well as general aviation pilots. We'll be chatting about what it takes to keep our airline pilots healthy and safe up in the air. So buckle up and join us for this fantastic conversation. Dr. Caldwell, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Glad to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background, your medical background, and how you became an aviation medical examiner?
Sure. I'm board certified actually in emergency medicine. I did that for 24 years. And after that, I was getting tired, especially after COVID. And I decided to become an AME because I'm a pilot too. I'm just a lowly private pilot, but I learned to fly in college in the late 80s. It was a way to get out of the ER rut and then to tie the two things that I enjoy most in life. I became an AME 5 years ago. I became a senior AME 3 years ago. It's a great job. It's a great way to practice medicine. And if pilots can't fly, what do they like to do? To sit around and talk with other pilots.
Sure. Hangar talk.
Right.
Going from being an ER doctor to becoming a FAA AME, what inspired you to specialize specifically in aviation medicine? There's a whole plethora of medical practices that you could aspire into. What specifically drove you into becoming an aviation medical examiner?
Because I love to fly. Now, I don't,
Okay.
my eyes are goofy and I don't have the vision to be a commercial pilot. So I went to med school instead. But it was able to at least get as many people in the air and to keep people flying for as long as they can. So it just seemed like a natural fit.
So for some people that are listening or watching this podcast, not everybody understands what an aviation medical examiner does. Can you just briefly talk about that?
Sure. So an aviation medical examiner is a physician, has to be an MD or DO, who has been designated by the FAA to perform flight physicals for FAA certified pilots.
And for those that are not a pilot, whether it's general aviation or airline, can you describe the process and the requirements for a pilot or an aspiring pilot to pass an aviation medical exam?
All pilots, let's see, putting aside sport pilots and base and glider pilots, but regular private pilots, second class, or so in general, most pilots beyond sport pilots need to have an FAA medical in order to exercise the privileges of their pilot's license. So it depends, the class of medical certificate depends upon what kind of pilot you are. A private pilot just needs a third class medical. A commercial pilot needs to have a second class medical, or someone who's flying for hire, such as a crop duster, CFI, EMS, Sheriff's Department, they need to have a second class medical. And then the highest grade is airline transport pilots who need a valid first class medical. So
Yes.
While you're just like your license is good for life, in order to be valid, you need to have your biannual flight review or whatever the current status is, but you also need to have a valid medical to exercise the privileges of that particular flight certificate that you have.
Fantastic. And being an airline pilot myself, I understand obviously the process of getting a FAA certified in my class. In my particular scenario, it's a first class that I need
Correct.
to have. How can a pilot, especially a professional pilot, maintain their health to ensure that they do pass their either semi-annual or annual medical exam? Speaking from
Well, I think the biggest anecdotally, professional pilots compared to the general public, which I treated for many years, in general are much healthier than the general public. You just don't see, now granted it's selection bias, but you just overall you see a lot more healthier people who are professional pilots, even in their late 50s, early 60s compared to the general public. But the things like that's applicable to all people are especially applicable to professional pilots. Keep the weight off. That's the number one thing. Exercise, eat better. If you have a medical problem, go see your doctor and follow their instructions. Too often, not too often, but I think though professional pilots, particularly airline pilots, think that their PCP or going to the doctor is a boogeyman. And in some cases, they make things harder. If you have a problem, go see your doctor. For most issues, it can be easily, it's not a big deal. Hypertension is the most common medical problem, both in the general public and amongst licensed pilots. It's a really easy thing to deal with the FAA. They make it super easy. It's not a big deal. So if you have hypertension, get on medication, talk to your AME. It's not a big deal. It just really isn't. So, but going back to generality, the number one thing is keep the weight off, exercise, eat better. I know it's very difficult to do, particularly if, as an airline pilot, because airport food is crap, airline food is junk. And then if you're a wide body guy like you, it's sitting around for long flights. There's not a whole lot of chance to exercise. And then when you get there, just like when I worked nights for 20 or 24 years, you're exhausted. And so keeping up with exercise and eating is very difficult because you're always, so many of the time, even when you're not flying, you're in recovery phase, right? You just feel, you wake up the next day and you feel like crap. And so I realize it's very difficult, particularly as you're older, but starting good habits and maintaining them is the key to fly, is both better life and a better career flying. You can think of it this way: small little changes here will lead to great big changes here. And so if you just start those things early, you won't have the problems later on in life.
Absolutely. I completely understand what you're referring to, Dr. Caldwell. Completely get that, being that I have some potentially bad habits as well.
We all do. It's human.
Yeah, in terms of lifestyle changes, and you've referred to eating healthy, exercising, keeping the weight down, are there any advice that you would want to share with the people that are watching and listening here that is a absolute must? So in other words, some of the key required regulations that a airline pilot must meet in terms of their standards to the health.
Like when you do a physical, there are certain requirements for blood pressure. The FAA is pretty lenient because I think they realize that just thinking of a flight physical, a pilot's blood pressure immediately goes up. Because so there's a lenience. Again, it goes back to things that help the general public will especially be helpful for professional pilots. Number one is weight, because that leads, elevated weight leads to, high blood pressure. It also, there's a lot of people who have special issuances for obstructive sleep apnea. And the FAA, if you look at the forms that we fill out for the FAA, it's 5 different web pages. One of them is solely dedicated to obstructive sleep apnea. So the FAA takes it very seriously. One of the ways you can help avoid obstructive sleep apnea is keeping weight off. If you have a lot of fat here, some people are going to have it no matter what. But for a lot of people, if they're thinner, they don't have to be skinny. They just have to be skinnier. And that can help with blood pressure. It can help with sleep apnea, helping avoid developing it. It can also help particularly with the development of diabetes. So as people get better, bigger and bigger, at a certain point, the body's ability to handle sugar becomes impaired. Exactly where that is going to be very, for some people, it can be 500 pounds and they're not diabetic and their A1C is fine. Other people, they get 40 pounds overweight and then they can start spilling sugar in their urine and they can end up going down the road with diabetes. if you just keep the weight off, again, you don't have to be what you are in high school, but if you just keep thinner, then the chance of you develop hypertension, diabetes, and the high cholesterol that goes with those is much less. And then if you avoid those three with the evil trifecta, which then leads you to heart disease later on or stroke later on.
Wow, thank you. Medicine has evolved. The latest technology, the criterias in terms of medical standards. How do you stay updated with the changes of aviation medical standards and the regulations? Or do they hardly change at all?
So they do change. The FAA is very good about that. At the beginning of every month, they issue out to our web portal changes to the AME guide, and it lists the changes for that month. They're readily available. The big thing is most recently, the FAA has changed how to deal with pilots who've had episodes of simple depression or anxiety more than 2 years ago, whereas before they would have to go through the special issuance process. Now, if the AME feels comfortable and can look at the documentation, if everything's fine, the AME can issue, they just have to document it. That's a great burden off of people who had issues years ago, and they can get them in the air a lot faster rather than going down the very burdensome and lengthy special issuance process. But it's through those monthly updates that AMEs get advice as to what the changes are in terms of the FAA, in terms of documentation and criteria.
I see. So speaking of that, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see or face as a aviation medical examiner?
I think the biggest thing that I have is getting pilots to bring in the required paperwork. It's usually people with a special issuance. They realize they're more likely to bring their stuff in because it's a much stricter, it's a yes or no. You need this, you need to bring this in, it needs to be this sent to the FAA. Otherwise, you're going to get your ticket pulled. It's just that eventually the FAA, if they're not happy, they will pull tickets if they're not happy with either the lack of paperwork or the quality of the paperwork. For other things, for CACIs, which stands for conditions AMEs can issue, most of these things are common medical conditions like hypothyroidism or high blood pressure or colitis or asthma. Those people need to bring in a detailed progress note from their doctor once a year for first and second class. For third class, it's just whenever their medical is due. And that sometimes can be a little problematic in getting pilots to remember, yes, okay, you got to bring in this note. I need this stuff so that I can issue your AME, even though it's not going to Oklahoma City. It's important that the AME has that so that all his paperwork is in order.
Okay. So how do you address some of the unique medical needs of various different pilot types, whether they're professional airline pilots or just recreational pilots?
So the requirements and needs don't differ that much unless you get into the minutia, like a third class, a private pilot versus an ATP who had a heart attack. One needs to have a repeat catheterization after everything's been fixed versus a private pilot won't need that. But in terms of everything else, there's no big differentiation. The big thing is just getting pilots to understand what's needed and then get them to remember to do that.
And in terms of you being an aviation medical examiner, and you've been in it for 5 years, you're projecting that you plan on staying in this type of practice in aviation medicine for the foreseeable future?
Oh, I would not only sell a kidney on the black market to avoid it, I would harvest it myself. Yes, I am much happier here, and I think it's a great way to practice medicine. And I think the pilots are happy.
They haven't made any TV shows about an AME, but they have made various different shows about ER over the years.
And they're all crap. They're all crap.
Okay.
They just are.
A lot of famous actors have become movie stars from these TV shows. Anyhow, so in terms of technology, can you perhaps tell us how technology has impacted the field of aviation medicine? We have AI, we have all sorts of stuff that's in all sorts of different industries, and I'm curious if technology has impacted in the field of aviation medicine.
I've not been at that long, but as far as I could see, as long as I've been in, There's been no change. And I think in the foreseeable future, there's not going to be any change. As an aside, AI in medicine is not going to do anything in terms of day-to-day of care of patients. Now, they may start making inroads, say like with radiology, when it's simple pattern matching, or maybe start built into the EMRs so that it may spit out differential diagnosis and say, did you do this or this? But in terms of day-to-day care, it's not going to do anything. And I think it's pie in the sky to think otherwise. In terms of day-to-day aviation medicine, I think NASA astronauts only need to have a second-class medical. I could be wrong in that. It was some years since I looked at it, but there's nothing. They may do other testing beyond that, but I think the bare minimum is they need a second class. It's not going to do anything to change medicine right now. The fictionalizations or hallucinations that the large language models have. It may help in terms of going through records, but it's not going to do anything with the FAA on their end anytime soon because they're understaffed, they're overworked, and they don't have the resources. It may be beneficial for them to help go through stuff. It's not going to happen anytime soon.
So, given the success of your practice, what is your biggest challenge right now?
Not running out of energy.
Okay.
Yeah,
don't keep the weight down and size. Which
it
seems like what you do.
So I have two offices. One is in Naples, Florida. One is in Pompano Beach. It's 120 miles. So the drive gets a little bit old. And even though I do have my own airplane, which is a little Piper Pawnee, being a VFR pilot only, with the Florida storms in the summer and the fog and in the wintertime, I would not fly myself across. And then just growing. Part of it is it's a very niche medicine field. It's a niche of a niche. Doesn't really, not really amenable to more traditional means of marketing. Rather, I've tried various, and the best thing is word of mouth.
We're here. Hopefully we'll get your practice more out there. Your passion is obvious. What do you like best about what you do as a FAA certified aviation medical examiner?
So unlike emergency medicine, the medicine itself isn't very challenging because if you think about it, even a first-class medical with an EKG, it's a glorified school physical. Maybe it's more detailed, but there's nothing. It's not like a hypotensive patient who's got an aortic dissection in the ER. What I find particularly both challenging and rewarding is people who have medical problems is getting them back into the air and then getting them through the bureaucracy with the FAA. One of your colleagues, a 777 captain for American, had some medical issues. His AME in Florida just wouldn't make a phone call, just wouldn't call the FAA and say, what can we do to get this guy back in the air? And so he came down, saw me. I was called to talk to the doctor, the POD, the physician of the day, Oklahoma City. Pretty soon we got him on a special issuance. He's back flying. And a year after later, I made another phone call and get him off that special issuance.
Excellent. So you're here to help pilots to make sure that they are obviously befitting of the regulatory standards, but also you're there to help them in the event that
something happens.
That something like that. Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you handle a situation where a pilot may not meet that medical requirement, going through the medical and something was found to be less than standard? How would you handle that?
I can give you a couple examples. So I had one guy, it was a year or so ago, wanted to become a pilot. He had a very large heart murmur. And I told him, okay, you need to go see a cardiologist. And he ended up having, I think, mitral valve regurgitation. And so luckily at that time, there was I knew a cardiologist in town where I was and got him in there to start getting an evaluation to get an echocardiogram and figure out what exactly is done or what is causing the murmur and what needs to be done about it. I picked up a murmur on another pilot earlier this year. And I said, you have a problem. So he's in the process of getting an echocardiogram, figuring out what it is. I had another pilot just talk to him yesterday he has an aortic aneurysm. So a dilation of the aorta as it arises from the heart. And so we talked about what needs to be done putting aside the FAA stuff because he's grounded for the time being, but just in terms of what he needs to do in terms of get this evaluated, seeing a cardiothoracic surgeon, what needs to be done afterwards, but just dealing with the aneurysm itself.
Wow. In that type of a scenario, the pilot would go see their specialists, and then from that, perhaps more testing, more higher level of medical focus is on that issue to hopefully bring this to a resolve, right?
So the guy with the aneurysm, you will probably need to get it fixed before the FAA allows him to fly. The question is, the criteria that the FAA uses for when they want repair may be different from what the CT surgeon has. So if you're a regular Joe Blow and you have a heart attack and the cardiologist takes you to the cardiac catheterization lab, they put a wire in your heart, they inject some dye, they see the vessel that's included, they open it up, you're done. You'll have a follow-up stress test later on, cardiac rehab, that kind of thing. With the FAA, though, they want to have a repeat cardiac catheterization 3 to 6 months after the event. Regular medicine says that's not necessary. Insurance company says that's not necessary. And it's very difficult to get a cardiologist and the hospital and the insurance company to get on board saying, I know you don't think it's necessary, but the FAA requires this. So that's one of the big hurdles with dealing with FAA specific medicine versus general public medicine.
I see. Okay, so in terms of trends, what do you see shaping the future of aviation medicine, and how the role of a aviation medical examiner will evolve in the coming years to maintain air safety?
I don't see anything changing in terms of overall standards.
Okay.
I do think it
That's
was
good to know.
unfortunate that the FAA did not extend the limit for airline pilots.
Sure.
Yeah, I thought that was unfortunate because, as I mentioned before, anecdotally, I think as a group, airline pilots, there's one guy I have he's more ripped than I ever was in my entire life. And there are lots of people like that they're just much healthier. And I don't foresee them being a problem. And then in terms of you're thinking about their cognition, that's going to be picked up when you're flying with your FO or when you go to the sims for recurrency. That's not going to be picked up during a 20-minute or 30-minute flight physical. But when you're actually sitting there in the simulator for hours and hours or coming in to an ILS approach to minimums, the guy next to you is going to know if you're having problems, and that's going to be handled. And so I think that it's unfortunate. But in terms of anything else, I don't see the FAA may be getting more. I think over time, the FAA has gotten more lenient compared to things in the past, just like the change with simple depression versus automatic requiring an SI. Just they changed some of the ADHD thing. They have a fast track. If it's been more than 4 years and symptoms or medication, it's a lot easier. You don't have to go through the neurocognitive testing as opposed to someone who's taking medicine more recently. So that is all good. I think they could move faster in some regards. It's a bureaucracy.
Yes, in the U.S. government, one thing you can be sure of, and that is for sure bureaucracy.
I will say one thing on their behalf. So whenever I've called the physician of the day in Oklahoma City, they have always been kind, friendly, and as helpful as they can.
Wow, that is great to know. I don't think many of us are aware of that.
So people get these very intimidating letters that's copy and paste. You will have this under penalty of death or something like that. It's very intimidating. It's sent by registered and regular mail, and it's very scary to deal with that. But I found that talking to this is how I've been able to get people off special issuances. I got 2 people off 2 months ago and said, look, does this person still need to be on this? The FAA can save a lot of paperwork. It's not really applicable. And both times the airmen got letters saying, yeah, hey, your special issuance is over. Make sure you stay healthy and you're good to go.
Okay, fantastic. And any final words for your patients/clients?
Just do your best to stay healthy. And it's not rocket science. Everyone knows Americans, we eat too much. That's the biggest thing. And when you eat too much, then the high cholesterol, diabetes, hypertension. Then when you get that, and then you get the trifecta, then you suffer for heart disease and all that kind of and other things. Just do the simple yet hard things that everyone knows to do in order to stay healthy.
Stay healthy. Those are the two magic words. I want to thank everyone for tuning into this episode of Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth podcast. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Dylan Caldwell and gained some valuable insight into the world of aviation medicine. Feel free to reach out to us. And Dr. Caldwell's practice, the Aviators Clinic, has two convenient locations in Naples, Florida, and in Pompano Beach, Florida. The Naples office is right at the Naples airport, and which is next to the pilot shop and the general aviation terminal. You can also find Dr. Caldwell's website, which is aviatorsclinic.com. My name is David T.U., airline pilot and founder of DTY Wealth Planning Solutions. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, keep your wings level and your spirits high. Safe one.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com.